What do you think about the election in Turkey? Who are you rooting for? I'm not rooting for any of them. Turkey politically is you can categorize Turkish politics into two different factions. One is Islamist, and the other one is radical, secularist, nationalist. That's pretty much what it comes down to when it comes to Turkish politics. Turkey is broken down into two major factions, Islamist and nationalist. Now, the Islamists can also be very nationalistic, but they are nationalistic with an Islamic face. Then you have the other faction, which is also very nationalistic, but they emphasize a little bit more on race, and they emphasize more on the nation, and they don't really care for religion. I'm not rooting for any of them. Let me give you guys an example of what I mean. So, in the year 1822, there was a small island in Greece called Chios. Chios is spelled Chios. 1822, there was a war of independence being done by the Greeks against the Ottomans. The Greeks no longer wanted to be under Ottoman rule. And so the Greeks were fighting for their independence, understandably so. I mean, who wants to live under the Ottoman Empire, right? They were lunatics. Chios was known as a merchant island. It really had no interest in participating in the conflict because Chios was in a very comfortable position. It was known as a merchant island. In fact, even at that point, it had been known for thousands of years as a prestigious merchant island. There was a particular product that it was famous for. It was a type of resin that was only grown in Chios, and that resin was a very popular product in the Ottoman Empire. So the Ottomans had no interest in going to war with Chios. It wanted to maintain its relations with this economic island, merchant island, commercial merchant island. Some rebels, I think from Samnos, came to the island and they tried to convince the people to join the war for independence against the Ottoman Empire. Almost everybody in the island had no interest in participating in this conflict. There was a small number of men who did join the rebels, and they fought against Ottoman troops. And the small presence of rebels in Chios was enough to anger the Ottomans to the point where they wanted to orchestrate a massacre of the island. So the Ottomans had a policy: if you were 12 years and up and male, you were to be killed. If you were an infant boy, I think, little infant, they would kill you too. If you were female, aged 40 and up, 40 and older, you were to be killed because the Ottomans, they had no interest in 40-year-olds. They wanted young ladies. So you were dead if you were 40 and up and a woman. 25,000 people were butchered. 45,000 other people were enslaved, and between 10 to 20,000 people were driven out from their homes. They were displaced, and they were driven out of the island. This was done under the Sultan. This was done under the Sultanate. Fast forward to the early 1900s, you have a revolution in the Ottoman Empire. The Ottoman Empire is decaying and it's crumbling, and everybody knew that the fall of the Ottoman Empire was inevitable. The Albanians knew that the Ottoman Empire was going to fall. That's why the Albanians got so obsessed with nationalism in the late 19th century. Going into the early 20th century, they were obsessed with nationalism. They still are, because they knew that the Ottoman Empire was going to fall, and they wanted to take as much territory as possible for Albania. And if that meant killing Serbs, then they were okay with that. So Ottoman Empire was crumbling, and there was a revolution. Who did the revolution? It wasn't Islamist. It was radical atheists who believed in evolution. They believed in Darwinism. Basically, it was Turkish versions of Christopher Hitchens and Richard Dawkins. That's what it was. And they lodged a revolution against the Sultan, and they overthrew the Sultan, and they took over the Ottoman Empire, and they were called the Young Turks. The Armenians were very happy about the fact that the Sultan had been overthrown. And the reason for this is because I think this is too loud. Guy, this is too loud, let me know. The reason why the Armenians were happy about the revolution was because the Armenians suffered under the Sultan. They were persecuted by the Sultans. And so they saw a secular uprising in the Ottoman Empire as a new moment for the empire in which freedom would be allowed. Freedom for Christians, freedom for Armenians will be allowed, and the rights of Armenians would be respected. And this was what the Armenians were hoping for. They were wrong. So the Armenians thought, well, look, you have these secular nationalists who have taken over the empire. They're not Islamists. They're going to be okay. And the Armenians were wrong. Because what happened during the First World War? What happened, guys? 1 million Armenians were butchered. The worst massacre of Armenians was not done by sultans. The worst massacre of the Armenians was done by Turkish secular nationalists. So back to your question, who am I rooting for in Turkey? The Islamists or the secular nationalists? None of them. They're all evil. All of them. Every one of them. All these different parties in Turkey, Islamist, secularist, nationalist, they're all nasty. Turkish Republicans, the AK party, they're all bad. All of them are bad. How do I know this? Because you can say, well, Ted, the Armenian genocide, that was just history. Who cares? Okay. Go to Turkey. I don't recommend that you do, but go to Turkey and go talk to the secular nationalists and ask them, do you think the Armenian genocide happened? They're all going to say no. They're all going to deny that the Armenian genocide occurred. They're all Holocaust deniers. Why? Because they all participated. The Islamists and the nationalists in history, they all participated in the killing of Armenians and Greeks. And that's what it is. It's all nasty. In Turkey, you have the Grey Wolves, Turkish Nazis. That's what they are. They're Turkish Nazis. Back during the Cold War, there was a very popular Turkish Nazi movement that was headed by a man named, his name was Alp Arslan al-Turkis. And he started a Nazi paramilitary group, very pro-Nazi. They loved Mein Kampf. They were obsessed with the Turkish race being superior. They did pogroms. They killed Greeks. They were just evil, pure evil. They wanted to kill all the Armenians. They wanted to resume from where the Ottoman Empire left off. And this was during the Cold War. Who backed them? Who backed Alp Arslan al-Turkis? CIA. The CIA freaking A backed Alp Arslan al-Turkis. Why? Because NATO, during the whole Gladio operation, was obsessed with using Nazis to fight the Russians. And ain't shit changed. Nothing has changed, guys. Nothing's changed. You go to Turkey, who do you see? You see the nationalists, you see the Islamists. America doesn't mind backing any one of them. Why? Same reason. Use the Turks against the Russians. During the Cold War, the Americans were also backing Ukrainian Nazis. This is a fact. The mastermind of the Volyn massacre, in which 100,000 Poles were butchered. His name was Mykola Lebed. You would think Mykola Lebed would have been put in the frickin' Nuremberg trials and hung for his crimes. Nope. Mykola Lebed came to the United States, got a job with the CIA, and the U.S. government gave him a nice, comfy position working for a nonprofit. And what kind of nonprofit was this? Spreading Ukrainian nationalism. Ain't shit changed, guys. Ain't shit changed. America is still an extremely powerful country. Yes, I agree. It's a very powerful country. I know I've talked a lot about how the American empire is reclusing, but I don't think it's because America is weak. I think it's just because Americans don't give a shit about war anymore. They don't want to be involved in war because they realize that war is very ugly and nasty and people die. It's not fun. It's not a Toby Keith concert. It's not we'll stick a boot up your ass because it's the American way type of thing. It's hell. Plain and simple. So Americans aren't interested in helping other countries or controlling other countries. Americans are interested in getting a government that will focus on helping Americans, as opposed to maintaining the American global security umbrella. And that's completely understandable. It's completely understandable. Yeah, no problem. Well, I'm glad you asked the question. I think it was a great question because it gave me the opportunity to explain all that. This is something that I've known about for a long time when it comes to Turkey and its nationalists. It's not all Islam. It's not all Muslims. It's a mix. Turkey is a very divided country. It's divided between Islamists and nationalists.